of the closet.
Right.
While the skeletons were already out of the closet because
yeah.
she sat there and heard every one of them as a friend first.
Right.
And so there was no judgment. And so it was a very safe space for me because I didn't have to feel judged about the things I had done in the past.
Mm-hmm. But I would imagine there are a lot of other women out there who would have been very upset at some of the things that you did and not have any parts of you. Or, but it sounds like that wasn't the case here.
No, not at all.
Very, very, very good. If you had to play Monday morning quarterback, and there was something that you could change about your life, is there anything you would change?
No, I wouldn't. I think, life is a journey. Mm-hmm. And, you go through different points to have different experiences. While I will say I feel guilty or convicted about some of the things I've done, I recognize that without those parts of my journey, then rededication would have never been born. Mm-hmm. And so I can appreciate the journey for what it was, mm-hmm. and I pray that my journey told in a book can help somebody else not hit those landmines that I hit.
Right. How comfortable were you about revealing? I mean, this is not the kind of thing that most people mm-hmm. would be comfortable writing about, but you went there. How comfortable were you with that? Were you nervous, or you felt that this is what God had in store for you, or this is what you felt had to be done in order for the right story to get out there?
Absolutely. I definitely was nervous. I think it was, one, in penning the testimony, I had to continually pray mm-hmm. because I wanted to make sure I didn't rewrite history to protect my own ego. Right. And it was very easy to do at certain points. You're looking at a story like, do I want to talk about this? Do I want to talk about that? Really fighting with myself, but God really pressed on my heart. So if you're going to tell the story, you got to tell the story. Right. Because the reality is that people are going through exactly what you went through. And that authenticity, people will pick up from the pages. Mm-hmm. Once you start trying to kind of hide and share different experiences, somebody's going to miss out on the opportunity to reconnect with me in the way that you did. Mm-hmm. So it became not so much about what I wanted to hide or what I wanted to keep to myself. It became more about, God, this is the story that you've scripted, so let me put it on paper for you.
Right. Now you and your wife don't have any children.
No.
But what would you tell a Christian family that does have kids and their kids are college age or maybe even high school age about abstinence and sexuality? Because these days kids are good to say, well, Mom and Daddy, I know you mm-hmm. did so-and-so when you were my age, so why can't I? What would you advise those parents to tell their children?
Well, I think one of the things is if I look at from my own experience, I think we haven't been authentic with youth. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times we tell them, and I think about what I heard, don't have sex. That's all you hear. Don't have sex, don't have sex, don't have sex. Mm-hmm. Nobody's telling you when you're not having sex, what should you be doing? Nobody tells you what not having sex really looks like. So the only thing I have is I have on one hand, don't have sex. Then on TV, on the radio, on the videos, I see that sex looks really, really fun and looks really, really enjoyable. So you have to start balancing that. So if you're talking to your kids about not having sex, you have to be able to open them and expose them to things they could be doing while they're not doing it, and really show them the true benefits. One of the things, actually in Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, he talks about this concept of sexual transmutation. And he talks about the fact that sexual desire is one of the strongest desires that man has. Mm-hmm. And he talks about if man is able to push that down and refocus that energy elsewhere, how much further man can go. And so you think about it, that's a pretty pie-in-the-sky concept, but if you break it down to your children and say, well, I look at all the things, and I talk to you sometimes and say, look, think about all the money that you spend trying to pursue women and have sex. Think about all the time you spend calling 8 girls in a night, and then you don't get your homework done. Right. I mean, all these things, they seem light and trite at the time, but they compound themselves over time, and it becomes an issue. So I think you have to be transparent, expose them to the true benefits of it, and just be honest with them.
So that's where the church probably can play another role too. How can the church improve preparing its young folks for the kind of things that they will experience away from home? Is there anything that you found works to keep the children connected to the church, that can keep them involved in doing things, unlike what a lot of folks have done, where they just kind of stray off the path? What can the churches do in this regard?
So there's a couple of different components to that. I think one of the things is the church has to start more openly discussing it. Mm-hmm. I think it's still a fairly taboo topic in the church. We have to be real about it. It's a real issue. Right. Our youth are dealing with it. Our young adults are dealing with it. Our singles are dealing with it. And that's another thing I think we have to make sure that while we typically treat it as a youth issue, this is a single Christian issue. So the 45-year-old that's single, if she's having sex, she's just as wrong in God's eyes as the 16-year-old. And I think when you can start to show that it's not a thing for the kids, this is a thing for the kingdom, then it helps youth and all parties involved to really respect that whole piece. I think on the other side of it is when you look at the church and what else it can do, as far as outreach ministries, a lot of churches have college ministries. So if I think about it, for example, something that may have worked for me, I think would have been a good idea. When I left my home church, I'm all the way in D.C.,
right.
I never heard from anybody at my church ever again until I came back home to visit.
Okay.
So nobody really kept a tab on me while I was there. Just a phone call every now and then. I mean, my mom's calling me, but maybe that one of those deacons called me every now and then and said, "Hey, Brother Armond, how you doing? You know, how's it going?" And asking me the tough questions, because another thing in the church we have a hard time doing is holding each other accountable for fear of judgment. So we don't want to say, "Hey, Brother Armond, how you doing? So, you know, you been dating any women up there?" Some people would feel like, I don't want to ask him that because he's going to think I'm judging him.
Right.
But I feel like if we're going to be real about this issue, let's put it out there. You know, if somebody gets upset, it's probably going to be because they're convicted about the things they're doing. And at least if you can spark that conviction, you've done your part.
Right.
You know, so I think that's just another example of something that I think the church can do, just to make sure we keep our hands on people when they do leave, especially youth when they go into college, because once they go there, they're by themselves again.
Yeah. And I think one of the issues that that goes unspoken in a lot of in churches or in other religious institutions is the issue of sexuality and what can be done. That seems to be the last thing anybody wants to talk. They'll talk about everything else, but when it comes to that subject, it's very, very uncomfortable. Have you found that to be the case? And
absolutely, and I think it's from an issue of people are convicted about it. So unfortunately, as a society, we've made it very hard to be, as a church, as the church, we've made it very hard for people to raise their hand and say, I have sinned. Because we somehow, we're nowhere imperfect, but yet we still put on the image of perfection.
Right.
And so the problem is, like, if a pastor raised his hand and said during service, you know, I never was celibate. You know, me and the First Lady, we never practiced celibacy. The church would be in an uproar. It would be an abomination.
Right.
But think about how powerful that would be to free people who are in that very thing right then. Right. But people try to hide and shield the things they've gone through. So I think there's this bondage that continues, and so that's part of the issue that I've seen to be challenging for the church.
Armond, you shared a lot about your life story. Any last thoughts that you might have?
You know, I just think with the book, you know, and with my life, I think it's just all about submitting to God's will. You know, and I think every person has their own journey, and that journey takes different time, and it has its own pace. But I think at the end of the day, each person really has to respond to the voice of God in their own life. And I think for me, that's what these two things are a product of. And he's continuing to tell me things now. So the journey is not over. You know, I have not arrived anywhere. This is just one thing, and I'm still struggling with issues, but I'm continuing to just look to him and seek guidance in all those things.
Armond, you're an example of how God can bless, and we thank you for coming to DelValNow. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Al Hunter Jr. Take care.